When my sister Fallon called me sobbing from a police station parking lot, I thought it was just another misunderstanding. 30 minutes later, federal agents were breaking down doors, and I realized my war hero sister had uncovered something that could destroy lives. Before we dive in, tell us where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. You have to understand something about Fallon before this story makes sense. She's not the kind of person who cries. Ever. In 28 years of being her older sibling, I'd seen her tears maybe 3 times. Once when our dog died, once when she shipped out to Afghanistan, and once when she came home from her second tour with shrapnel scars running down her left arm. Even then she cried quietly, like she was ashamed of showing weakness. So when her voice cracked on that phone call, when I could hear her breath catching between words, I knew something was terribly wrong. Fallon had always been our family's rock. She was the kid who stood up to bullies twice her size in middle school, the teenager who worked double shifts to help pay for college, and the young woman who enlisted right after graduation because she said someone had to protect the country we all took for granted. She came back from Afghanistan different, like most soldiers do. Quieter, more watchful. She'd sit at family dinners scanning exits and positioning herself with her back to the wall, but her core never changed. Fallon still believed in doing the right thing, even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. That's what made the phone call so terrifying. My sister, who had faced down enemy fire and improvised explosive devices, was falling apart in a police station parking lot in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. The same woman who once told me that fear was just information your brain gives you to keep you alive was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her words. "They don't believe me," she kept saying. "They think I'm the criminal. They think I stole from the company." I remember gripping my phone tighter, my heart racing as I tried to process what she was telling me. Fallon worked for Nexus Solutions, a tech company that handled security consulting for businesses around the Midwest. It was supposed to be a good job for her, using her military experience in a civilian setting. She'd been there 8 months and seemed to be adjusting well to life after the service. But something had been off lately. Fallon had started working longer hours, coming to family gatherings distracted and jumpy. She'd check her phone constantly, then put it face down like she didn't trust it. When our mom asked if everything was okay at work, Fallon would just say she was learning a lot about how businesses really operate. The way she said it made it sound like the lesson wasn't a pleasant one. Now she was in police custody, and I could hear officers talking in the background of our call. Their voices were professional but cold, the way cops sound when they've already decided you're guilty. My sister, who had taken an oath to defend the Constitution and had bled for that promise, was being treated like a common criminal. The worst part was the fear in her voice. Not fear for herself, but fear that something bigger was slipping away. "If they don't let me talk to the FBI," she whispered into the phone, "people are going to get hurt. Real people. People like the ones I served with." I didn't understand what she meant then. I thought maybe the stress of civilian life had finally gotten to her, that the transition from military to corporate work had triggered some kind of breakdown. Veterans struggle with that adjustment all the time. Maybe Fallon had made a mistake at work and blown it out of proportion in her mind. I was so wrong it almost cost lives. Within 30 minutes of that call, everything exploded. FBI agents surrounded the police station like they were raiding a terrorist cell. Local news trucks appeared out of nowhere. The quiet Thursday afternoon in our small Iowa city turned into something that belonged on the national news. And at the center of it all was my little sister, the woman who couldn't stand to see injustice and had just proven that some battles follow you home from war. The woman who had discovered that the company she worked for wasn't just stealing data, they were selling out American soldiers to the highest bidder. That phone call changed everything. It changed how I saw my sister, how I understood heroism, and how I learned that sometimes the most important fights happen not on foreign battlefields, but in corporate offices and police stations, fought by people brave enough to risk everything for strangers they'll never meet. This is the story of how my sister went from suspected criminal to American hero in the span of one afternoon, and how I learned that doing the right thing doesn't get easier when you come home from war. Sometimes it gets harder. To really understand what happened that day, you need to know who Fallon was before everything went sideways. She wasn't just my sister. She was the conscience of our entire family, the one person we could always count on to do the right thing, even when it cost her. Growing up, Fallon was the kid who brought home stray cats and got into fights defending kids who couldn't defend themselves. I remember when she was 12 and found out that Tommy Chen was getting picked on for his accent. Instead of just telling a teacher like most kids would, Fallon spent her lunch money for 2 weeks buying Tommy extra snacks, then cornered the bullies after school and told them if they messed with Tommy again, they'd answer to her. The bullying stopped. That was Fallon. She saw injustice and couldn't just walk away from it. When she enlisted right after high school, our parents were heartbroken but not surprised. Someone has to stand between good people and the bad guys, she told our dad the night before she left for basic training. Might as well be someone who's too stubborn to quit. She served 2 tours in Afghanistan, came home with a Bronze Star and scars she never talked about. The Army had taught her to read situations, to spot threats before they materialized, and to trust her instincts even when everyone else thought she was wrong. Those skills served her well overseas, but they made civilian life complicated. After her discharge, Fallon struggled to find her place. She tried college for a semester, but couldn't sit still in lecture halls after spending years on high alert. She worked construction for a while, then security at the mall, then bounced between a few different jobs that never seemed to fit. Our mom worried she'd never settle down. Our dad just wanted her to be happy. Then, 8 months ago, Fallon landed the position at Nexus Solutions. It seemed perfect for her. The company provided cybersecurity consulting for businesses throughout Iowa and Illinois, helping them protect sensitive data and comply with federal regulations. They needed someone with military experience, someone who understood how to think like an adversary. Fallon's background made her valuable. For the first few months, she loved it. She'd come to Sunday dinners talking about encryption protocols and data vulnerability assessments. She was using her brain in ways the military had trained her for, but without the constant threat of violence. She even started dating a guy named Brett from the IT department, though she kept that pretty quiet. But something shifted around month 5. The enthusiasm in her voice when she talked about work disappeared. She started coming to family gatherings late, if she came at all. When she did show up, she seemed distracted, constantly checking her phone and then putting it face down like she didn't trust it. Everything okay at work? Our mom asked her one Sunday in early March. Fallon looked up from her plate, and for just a second, I saw something in her eyes that reminded me of when she first came back from Afghanistan. That hyper-aware look like she was calculating exits and threats. "I'm learning a lot about how businesses really operate," she said. "It's educational." The way she said educational made it sound like she'd discovered something rotten. She started working longer hours, staying at the office until 9 or 10 at night. When I asked her about it, she said she was working on a special project for Dr. Renwick, her supervisor. "He's got me analyzing some client data patterns," she explained. "Looking for unusual access attempts, that kind of thing." But Fallon's military training had taught her to recognize patterns that others missed, and she'd started noticing things that didn't add up. Data transfers happening at odd hours. Client information being accessed by people who shouldn't have clearance. Foreign IP addresses appearing in system logs where they didn't belong. The week before everything exploded, Fallon had called me at work, which she never did. "Can I ask you something hypothetical?" she said. "If you discovered your employer was doing something illegal, something that could hurt people, what would you do?" I told her to report it to HR or maybe call a lawyer. She was quiet for a long moment. "What if HR was part of the problem? What if the thing you discovered was so big that you weren't sure who to trust?" I should have pressed her for details. I should have realized she wasn't speaking hypothetically. Instead, I gave her some generic advice about following proper channels and protecting herself legally. I failed to understand that my sister had stumbled onto something that went way beyond office politics or corporate misconduct. That Thursday morning, Fallon texted me at 6:47 a.m. The message was short. "If anything happens to me today, remember that I love our family and I'm doing this because it's right. Check Granddad's tackle box." I stared at that text for 10 minutes, my coffee getting cold in my hands. It sounded like a goodbye note, and that terrified me more than anything. Fallon didn't send dramatic messages. She was practical, straightforward, military precise in her communication. By lunchtime, I hadn't heard anything else from her, which was unusual. By 3 o'clock, I was starting to worry. At 4:23 p.m., my phone rang with a call from an unknown local number. It was Fallon, crying in a police station parking lot, and everything I thought I knew about her quiet life at Nexus Solutions was about to be turned completely upside down. The story Fallon told me through tears and broken sentences over that phone call was worse than anything I could have imagined. What started as a routine data analysis project had turned into the discovery of systematic treason, and my sister was caught in the middle of it. 3 weeks earlier, Dr. Renwick had assigned Fallon to investigate what he called irregular access patterns in their client database. Nexus Solutions handled cybersecurity for over 200 companies across the Midwest, including several defense contractors and firms that employed former military personnel. The client list read like a directory of people with security clearances and sensitive information. He said they were seeing unusual login attempts, Fallon explained, her voice shaking. Foreign IP addresses trying to access client files. He wanted me to track the intrusion attempts and figure out how they were getting in. But Fallon's military intelligence training had taught her to look beyond the obvious. While tracking the supposed intrusions, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The foreign IP addresses weren't breaking in. They were being invited in. The access logs showed a pattern of authorized downloads happening between midnight and 3 a.m. when no legitimate employees should have been in the system. Personnel files, home addresses, social security numbers, and employment histories of defense contractor employees were being systematically copied and transferred to servers in 3 different countries. At first, I thought it was a mistake in the logs, Fallon told me. But I pulled the raw server data, and it was all there. Someone with administrative access was selling our clients' most sensitive information. The more she dug, the worse it got. The stolen data included detailed personal information about active military personnel, veterans working for government contractors, and their family members. Home addresses, children's schools, spouse employment information, financial data. Everything a hostile intelligence service would need to identify and target American military families. Fallon had printed out transaction logs showing payments of $50,000 to $200,000 being made to offshore accounts every time a new batch of data was transferred. The operation had been running for over 2 years, generating millions in illegal revenue while putting countless American families at risk. The hardest part was realizing that Dr. Renwick, the man who had assigned her to investigate the intrusions, was the one orchestrating them. His digital signature was on every unauthorized transfer. He'd brought Fallon into the investigation not to stop the data theft, but to help him cover it up by creating false evidence of external hacking attempts. He wanted me to write a report blaming everything on Chinese hackers, she sobbed. He had fake evidence prepared and everything. I was supposed to be his fall guy, the military expert who confirmed that foreign agents had penetrated the system. But Fallon couldn't do it. Her oath as a soldier hadn't expired when she left the military. She'd sworn to defend her country against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and she'd just discovered that domestic enemies were selling out American soldiers for profit. She faced an impossible choice. Report the conspiracy through normal corporate channels, knowing that Renwick's supervisor might be involved and the evidence could disappear overnight. Or take the evidence directly to federal authorities and risk being branded a traitor herself. Fallon chose to trust the system she'd served. She copied the incriminating files onto encrypted flash drives, planning to deliver them personally to the FBI field office in Des Moines. She thought if she presented the evidence in person, explained her military background, and showed them the scope of the betrayal, they'd have to listen. She never made it to the FBI building. Dr. Renwick discovered the missing files that morning and immediately called the police, claiming that Fallon had stolen proprietary company data and was planning to sell it to competitors. He painted her as a disgruntled veteran with financial problems, someone who'd exploited her security access for personal gain. When Cedar Rapids police pulled her over 2 blocks from the FBI field office, they found the flash drives in her car exactly as Renwick had predicted they would. To them, it looked like a clear case of corporate espionage. They didn't know the drives contained evidence of actual espionage being committed against the United States. "They won't listen to me," Fallon cried. Renwick got to them first. He's got lawyers and official complaints, and I just look like a crazy veteran making wild accusations. They think I'm the criminal. The cruelest irony was that Fallon's own integrity had trapped her. She could have stolen the evidence and disappeared, or leaked it anonymously to the media. Instead, she'd tried to do everything by the book, and the book was being rewritten by the very people she was trying to expose. As I listened to her breakdown over the phone, I realized my sister wasn't just facing criminal charges. She was fighting for her life against people who had already demonstrated they were willing to sell out American soldiers for money. If they'd betray their country, what would they do to protect themselves from exposure? That's when Fallon whispered the words that changed everything. I need you to call Agent Morrison at the FBI. Tell him about Project Blackwater. Tell him the real files are hidden in Granddad's tackle box. The moment Fallon mentioned Agent Morrison and Project Blackwater, something clicked in my mind. My sister didn't speak in code or make up dramatic names for things. If she was using specific terms, especially while crying in a police station parking lot, they meant something real and urgent. Fallon, I need you to listen to me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Are you safe right now? Can anyone hear this conversation? I'm in my car in the parking lot. They let me make one phone call, and I used it on you instead of a lawyer. I probably have 10 minutes before they come looking for me. That decision told me everything I needed to know about how desperate the situation was. Fallon had given up her legal protection to warn me instead. Whatever she'd discovered was bigger than her own safety. What exactly am I supposed to tell this Agent Morrison? I asked. Tell him Project Blackwater is active and the client list has been compromised. Tell him the verification codes are in sequence starting with Bravo 77. He'll know what that means. I grabbed a pen and wrote down everything she said, my hands shaking. None of it made sense to me, but Fallon's military training had taught her to be precise under pressure. If she said these details mattered, they mattered. The real evidence is in Granddad's tackle box in his garage, she continued. I made backup copies of everything and hid them there last night. Transaction logs, client data, payment records, everything Renwick thought he deleted. You need to get those files to Morrison before Renwick realizes I made copies. My grandfather had passed away 2 years earlier, but we'd kept his house exactly as he left it. The old tackle box sat on a shelf in his garage, filled with rusted hooks and ancient fishing line that no one had touched since his funeral. It was the perfect hiding place for something you never wanted found. I made the decision in that moment to trust my sister completely. Fallon's instincts had kept her alive through 2 combat deployments. If she said this was bigger than a corporate crime, then it was bigger than a corporate crime. I'm going to Granddad's house right now, I told her. But Fallon, you need to hang up and call a lawyer. Don't say anything else to the police until you have legal representation. There's no time for lawyers, she said. If Morrison doesn't get this evidence today, people are going to die. Real people with families. People like the soldiers I served with. The line went quiet, except for the sound of her breathing. I could hear voices in the background, probably officers wondering where she was. I have to go, she whispered. Remember, Agent Morrison, FBI field office in Des Moines. Project Blackwater. The files in Granddad's tackle box will prove everything. The call ended, and I was left sitting in my living room with a piece of paper covered in what looked like military code words, staring at the phone like it might explode. My sister was in police custody, accused of corporate espionage, and I was apparently her only hope of proving her innocence. I drove to Granddad's house going 15 miles over the speed limit, my mind racing through everything Fallon had told me. The house still smelled like his pipe tobacco, and walking into the garage brought back memories of summer afternoons spent watching him organize his fishing gear with military precision. He'd been a Navy man, and even in retirement, everything had its place. The tackle box was exactly where I remembered it, sitting on the shelf between a toolbox and a collection of coffee cans filled with screws and bolts. When I opened it, I found more than fishing supplies. Underneath the tray of lures and sinkers, Fallon had hidden 3 flash drives and a manila envelope thick with printed documents. The papers showed bank transfer records, screenshots of file downloads, and client lists that made my stomach drop. I recognized some of the names from local news stories about soldiers who'd been deployed overseas. But it was the transaction amounts that really hit me. Hundreds of thousands of dollars changing hands every month. Payment for information that could get American military families killed or kidnapped. This wasn't white-collar crime. This was treason on a massive scale. I called the FBI field office in Des Moines with shaking hands. When I asked for Agent Morrison, the receptionist put me on hold for what felt like forever. "This is Agent Morrison," a voice finally said. "Who is this?" "My name is Riley Chen," I said, using the fake name Fallon had coached me to use years earlier for emergencies. "I need to tell you about Project Blackwater. The verification codes start with Bravo 77. The silence on the other end of the line lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then Morrison's voice became sharp and focused. "Where are you right now? Don't go anywhere. Don't talk to anyone else. We're coming to you." 23 minutes after I hung up with Agent Morrison, black SUVs started arriving at the Cedar Rapids police station like something out of an action movie. I wasn't there to see it happen, but the local news crews captured everything, and the footage played on repeat for weeks afterward. What I did see was Agent Morrison's team descending on Granddad's house with the efficiency of a military operation. 6 agents in tactical gear, 2 evidence technicians, and Morrison himself, a tall man with graying hair who looked like he'd been running on coffee and determination for months. "You did the right thing calling us," Morrison said as his team carefully photographed and cataloged every piece of evidence Fallon had hidden. "Your sister stumbled into the middle of an operation we've been tracking since March of last year." That's when the full scope of what Fallon had discovered became clear. Project Blackwater wasn't just the name of the espionage ring. It was the FBI's code name for a counterintelligence investigation targeting Chinese efforts to recruit assets inside American defense contractors. They'd been watching money flows, tracking communication patterns, and building a case against what they suspected was a network of corporate spies. "We knew someone at Nexus Solutions was involved," Morrison explained. The company had access to exactly the kind of information Beijing was acquiring. But we couldn't identify who was running the operation or how they were extracting the data. Your sister's evidence gives us everything we need. While Morrison's team was securing the evidence at Granddad's house, FBI agents surrounded the Cedar Rapids police station. Local news helicopters circled overhead as federal officers in body armor took positions around the building. Inside, Fallon was sitting in an interrogation room, still believing she might be charged with corporate espionage. Detective Sarah Holloway, the officer who'd been questioning Fallon, later told reporters that she'd never seen anything like it. One minute, she was processing what seemed like a routine white-collar case. The next minute, FBI agents were showing her federal warrants and explaining that her suspect was actually a key witness in a national security investigation. Agent Morrison walked into that room and said, "Ms. Fallon, you're not under arrest." "You're a hero," Detective Holloway recounted. The change in that young woman's face was something I'll never forget. She'd been holding herself together through pure willpower, and when she realized she wasn't going to prison, she just broke down and cried. But the real drama was happening simultaneously at Nexus Solutions. Armed with Fallon's evidence and 18 months of surveillance data, FBI agents executed search warrants at the company's headquarters and Dr. Renwick's home. They found encrypted communication devices, cryptocurrency wallets containing millions in Chinese payments, and detailed records of every piece of stolen information. Dr. Renwick was arrested in his office at 5:47 p.m., just as he was trying to delete files from his computer. His 2 accomplices, senior analyst Marcus Webb and IT director Linda Torres, were taken into custody at their homes within the hour. The scope of their betrayal was staggering. Over 24 months, they'd sold personal information on more than 3,000 military families to Chinese intelligence services. The most shocking revelation came from Renwick's personal files. He'd been recruited 6 years earlier while attending a cybersecurity conference in Singapore. Chinese intelligence had spent years positioning him to access exactly the kind of information he eventually stole. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was a long-term espionage operation that had been planned with military precision. When FBI agents stormed the police station, they found Fallon in the interrogation room with her head in her hands, still wearing the clothes she'd put on that morning when she thought she was going to save her country. She looked up as Agent Morrison walked in, and for the first time in hours, she smiled. "Agent Morrison," she said, standing up with the military bearing that civilian life had never quite erased. "I was wondering when you'd show up." "Ms. Fallon," Morrison replied, "on behalf of the United States government, I want to thank you for your service, both overseas and here at home." The local police officers who'd treated her like a criminal an hour earlier now stood awkwardly in the hallway, realizing they'd been interrogating someone who'd just prevented one of the largest intelligence breaches in recent history. Detective Holloway personally apologized and offered to drive Fallon home, but she declined. "I need to call my family," Fallon said. "My sibling is probably worried sick." When my phone rang at 6:15 p.m., I was still at Granddad's house, watching FBI evidence technicians pack up the last of the documents that had nearly cost my sister her freedom. Fallon's voice sounded different than it had that afternoon, stronger, relieved. "It's over," she said simply. "They got them. All of them." I started crying before she finished the sentence, not from sadness, but from pure relief that my sister was safe and that her integrity had been vindicated. The woman who'd spent her lunch money protecting Tommy Chen, who'd enlisted to serve her country, who'd risked everything to protect military families she'd never met, had proven once again that doing the right thing was worth any personal cost. "Fallon," I said, "I'm so proud of you." "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied. "Thank you for trusting me when nobody else would." Agent Morrison later told us that Fallon's evidence had prevented what could have been the largest compromise of military personnel data in American history. The information Renwick's team had already sold was bad enough, but they were planning to expand their operation to include active deployment schedules and classified contractor assignments. American soldiers were safer because my sister couldn't stand to see injustice and had the courage to fight it, even when fighting it nearly destroyed her. 3 weeks after the arrests, Fallon sat in a congressional hearing room in Washington, D.C., wearing her dress blue uniform for the first time since leaving active duty. The House Subcommittee on Intelligence and Counterterrorism had called her to testify about corporate security vulnerabilities and how private contractors could better protect military personnel data. I watched the hearing on C-SPAN from my living room, feeling a strange mix of pride and heartbreak as my sister answered questions about the biggest betrayal of her life. She spoke with the same clear, direct voice she'd used during that terrified phone call from the police station, but now she radiated confidence instead of desperation. "The current system relies too heavily on trust and too little on verification," she told the committee. "Companies handling sensitive military data need mandatory background checks every 6 months, not every 5 years. They need real-time monitoring of data access, not quarterly reviews that happen after the damage is done." Congressman Williams, a veteran himself, asked the question that had been haunting our family. "Ms. Fallon, what made you risk your career and freedom to expose this conspiracy?" Fallon was quiet for a moment, and I could see her thinking about how to explain something that had always been instinctive to her. "Sir, when I took my oath of enlistment, I swore to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That oath didn't expire when I left active duty. When I discovered that American military families were being targeted because of information stolen from my workplace, there was no choice to make. Some things are more important than personal safety." The hearing made national news, but the real impact happened quietly in the months that followed. Nexus Solutions was shut down permanently, its remaining employees scattered to other companies after extensive background investigations. Federal legislation requiring enhanced security protocols for military contractors passed both houses of Congress with bipartisan support. The Fallon Act, as it became known informally, created mandatory reporting requirements for suspected data breaches involving military personnel. Dr. Renwick, Marcus Webb, and Linda Torres were each sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for espionage. The Chinese intelligence operatives who'd recruited them were expelled from the United States, though they'd probably be back under different identities within a year. The $3.2 million they'd earned from selling American families information was seized and donated to veterans support organizations. But the most meaningful recognition came 6 months after the arrests, in the form of a letter Fallon received from Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, a soldier deployed in Eastern Europe whose family information had been among the stolen data. "Dear Miss Fallon," the letter began, "I will never know exactly how many people wanted to hurt my family because of information those criminals sold. What I do know is that my 2 daughters are safer today because of your courage. Thank you for protecting children you've never met and soldiers you'll never serve beside. You represent the best of what it means to be an American." Fallon cried when she read that letter, the same way she'd cried in the police station parking lot. But these were different tears. These were tears of recognition that her sacrifice had meaning, that the oath she'd taken as a young soldier still guided her actions as a civilian. Today, Fallon works as a senior security consultant for the Department of Homeland Security, designing protocols to protect government contractor data. She travels constantly, training corporate security teams and auditing systems for vulnerabilities. The work suits her perfectly. She gets to use her military intelligence background while serving her country in a new way. Our family dinners are different now. Fallon still sits with her back to the wall and scans exits when she enters a room. But she's not as isolated as she was after coming home from Afghanistan. She's found her place in civilian life, doing work that matters and using skills that were forged in combat zones and refined in corporate boardrooms. Sometimes she talks about the day everything changed, about the choice between staying silent and risking everything to do what was right. "I think about those families whose information was stolen," she told me recently. Parents trying to serve their country while worrying about their children's safety. Nobody should have to choose between military service and family security. The experience changed me, too. I learned that heroism isn't always dramatic or public. Sometimes it's a veteran working late nights to analyze data patterns or making backup copies of evidence and hiding them in a dead grandfather's tackle box. Sometimes it's trusting your sister's instincts when the whole world says she's wrong. That Thursday when Fallon called me crying from a police station changed everything I thought I knew about courage. Real courage isn't the absence of fear. It's being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. It's choosing to protect strangers at the cost of your own safety. It's believing that some principles matter more than personal consequences. My sister taught me that the oath to defend this country doesn't end when you take off the uniform. For some people, it's a lifetime commitment that follows them into corporate offices and police stations, into congressional hearing rooms and family dinners. Fallon carried her service with her everywhere, and when the moment came to choose between personal safety and national security, there was never really a choice at all. That's what real heroism looks like. Not dramatic gestures or public recognition, but quiet integrity that refuses to compromise even when compromise would be easier. Especially when compromise would be easier.